Dr. Eugene Lipov is the first doctor to perform the Stellate Ganglion Block for treatment of PTSD. The Stellate Ganglion Block is the first truly biological approach to PTSD, with results currently showing an efficacy rate of over 80%. Coming up next on Veteran on the Move.
Welcome to Veteran on the Move. If you're a veteran in transition, an entrepreneur wannabe, or someone still stuck in that job trying to escape, this podcast is dedicated to your success. And now, your host, Joe Crane.
If you're a veteran interested in a new game plan, 7-Eleven may have what you're looking for. Their structured franchise program is a perfect fit for your experience and skills. Franchise with a leader. It's a smart game plan for vets and a win for 7-Eleven. Check out the details at veteranonthemove.com/7-Eleven. Dr. Eugene Lipov is the founder of Healing Hero and the Global Post-Traumatic Stress Injury Foundation. In addition to being the first doctor to perform the Stellate Ganglion Block for treatment of PTSD, Dr. Lipov is the Chief Science Officer of the Global PTSI Foundation and a world-renowned certified anesthesiologist who specializes in pain management. He first discussed the Stellate Ganglion Block in front of Congress in 2010 and has published numerous medical papers on the use of SGB for PTSD. He and his patients have appeared on the Doctor's TV show multiple times to talk about the Stellate Ganglion Block and PTSD. A serial entrepreneur, doctor, and advocate, Dr. Lipov is dedicated to helping military personnel suffering from PTSD transition to a productive, healthy life. All right, Dr. Eugene Lipov, thanks for being here today. Before we get started talking about this fascinating treatment you have for PTSD, take us back a little bit and give us an idea what your background is.
So I was born in Ukraine, and I've been in the United States since I've been 14 years old. I finished medical school and my training in Chicago, and I spent 2 years in general surgery. Part of that work was doing trauma surgery and VA work. And then I did 2 extra years in anesthesia. And I got to do a lot of work in the VA hospital, West Side VA hospital. So I've always had interest in VA affairs and VA issues. My father was a veteran from World War II, and he had a pretty severe case of PTSD, so I had a lot of interest in that. Through an interesting set of circumstances, I came up with a treatment for PTSD using anesthetic technique, which is something I know a lot about. And that's why we're talking today, I assume.
Yeah, that's well, thank you for sharing your background. Just interviewed a couple interviews ago, immigrant from the Ukraine who became a Marine and is now involved in entrepreneurship, George Buchan. But so tell us, okay, I've never heard of the Stellate Ganglion Block. So give us a little bit of background on it and what's going on with that and how effective it is.
Sure. So basically, Stellate Ganglion Block has been around since 1925. It's been used for pain, arm pain, and headaches. And I've been trained to do it in late 1980s, and I've been using it for that. Then, through an interesting set of circumstances again, I figured out that it works for PTSD, and it works very rapidly. It works in 30 minutes. And the compliance is very high. So essentially, Stellate Ganglion Block is putting a local anesthetic or numbing up a fight and flight system in the neck on the right side. And then average number of procedures people need is about 2.5. The longest outlier right now has been 8 years, and he had 2 of them. So if you don't mind, I can give you a quick story so you can see what it looks like in medicine.
Yeah, absolutely.
So this gentleman was a special ops gentleman from Peoria, Illinois. His employer actually was a son of my patient. So this gentleman was brought down twice by unfriendly fire in Iraq. And then he was patrolling the street in Iraq, and he had to shoot a 12-year-old child, laid in an explosive because that child was sent to take out his squad. So when the soldiers came back, he was violent. He was on a lot of meds. He tried to strangle his wife 3 times. It was really awful. If you go to YouTube, his name is Jason Brown. There's a number of YouTubes about him. So it's been 8 years. He's still married the same woman. He's off all meds. He's working as a chemist. So the key point, and I've treated now a lot of veterans, and what we find a lot of them have an issue with is alcohol, way too much use of it. They're not able to hold the job because they can't focus, and the drugs make them really slow.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of where we're at.
Wow. Yeah, I think this is nothing but a personal opinion, but some of the ambitious use of pain meds and all sorts of other stuff and guys going on them, off them, or getting addicted to them is one of the biggest causes of veteran problems and veteran suicide rates. It's just, that's just my personal opinion from a lot of folks I know and what I've seen, not necessarily firsthand, but maybe secondhand with pain meds and all that stuff. So
it's not just the pain meds. Actually, the thing that makes people give them rage, as you talk about, I think it's Seroquel and atypical antipsychotics. Those particular drugs are very hard on the body, and they're designed for schizophrenia.
Mm-hmm.
And they can give you rage. They can give you diabetes. It can stop the heart. They have a lot of downsides.
What specific names of drugs are you talking about that fall into that class?
Seroquel specifically.
Seroquel.
Uh-huh.
Okay. Does it go by other names? I mean, is it similar to you're not talking like Prozac or?
No. Prozac is SSRI or antidepressant.
Uh-huh.
The whole class of compounds is called atypical antipsychotics.
Okay.
There was a study that came out, and they're more and more popular. The problem with that, there was a study that was done in 2016 through Yale, and it involved, I think, 15 VA hospitals, and they basically found that it's useless for PTSD.
Wow. Yeah.
But it's used, though, keep in mind.
It's still used, yeah. Okay, so how did you stumble across this stellate ganglion block? Was it like a mistake, or were you did the idea come to you sometime?
Yeah, actually, it was a rational prediction. So what happened was, my brother's a physician, so I sent him a patient with severe cough flashes. Stay with me for a second. I know it sounds irrelevant. So I sent him a patient with cough flashes, and he said, well, there's nothing I can do. He tried, whatever. And then there is a disorder that we treat using stellate ganglion block called CRPS, complex regional pain syndrome, where somebody has a burning hand. So he said, burning hand, burning everywhere is the same thing, and try a stellate. So we tried a stellate for a hot flash woman, and it worked very well. And then I published on that in some really big journals. And then Chicago Tribune, which is a local paper, went after me saying that I didn't know what I was doing and I was really a bad scientist and all of that. And one of the big complaints, they didn't say it didn't work. They said, you don't know how it works, so you shouldn't be doing it. Mm-hmm. So that gave me a lot of encouragement to read about 3,000 papers about stellate. One of the papers was from Finland, where they were doing clipping of a sympathetic chain, which is kind of similar to the stellate, for sweating of the hands. And they found that it took away PTSD. So when I found that paper, I thought this would be probably the right thing for us. And that's why I did it.
So you found documented evidence that somebody had used it over in Finland to actually get rid of PTSD.
Right. Not stellate, but it's a big surgical procedure. So mine was much easier than the surgical procedure.
Ah, okay. Okay, so take us back to the first time you tried this.
So the first guy, I called my brother after I read this. And I said, I think we should try to treat PTSD. So the first guy was a gentleman who was working in a used truck store, your truck parts store, something like that. Mm-hmm. So he was attacked, and there was a big robbery. They beat him up, and it was horrible. So 2 months after that, he was admitted he was on his way to be admitted to psychiatric ward. So my brother said, why don't you stop by, see my brother, and see if he helps you. So we did the injection. He didn't have to be admitted, and he did well. That was the first guy. And the second person was the veteran I told you about.
Wow. So you've actually been on the TV show The Doctors and actually talked to Congress about this method. So where are you at in actually getting validity around this procedure?
Well, it's interesting we're talking today because there was a paper written by the VA Compassionate Care Act. They did a review of everything about stellate. It came out today. actually. So it's yet to be seen what they're going to do, but actually they're saying it has a lot of promise and it needs more study, stuff like that. But they were very positive toward that. So I've been in the doctors actually 9 times. The last 2 appearances have not aired yet. And we've treated actually the last patient that I was on appearance with was a woman who was part of domestic terrorism. A guy came in a shotgun, killed 6 women, ran out of ammo and left. And the patient I treated was the survivor.
Wow, no kidding.
Sorry.
So I got a question, in layman's terms, because I'm a Marine and a pilot, and that's where my expertise lies in entrepreneurship. I'm not a medical doctor by any ways, but the most familiar thing to me about what you're talking about is an epidural. And yep. I've seen epidurals in the most popular use of epidurals when a woman's given birth.
Yep.
So is it similar where it blocks a set of pain for a limited amount of time? Or can you explain the difference? Because I think most people probably can identify with what an epidural does and how it's used.
Yeah, of course. It's actually a very good jumping point. So the stuff that's used in epidural, or the medicine, is called bupivacaine or local anesthetic.
Mm-hmm.
It does nubs up nerve fibers for about 8 hours. So if you think in the neck, it's a little different. They have something called ganglia, which is fight and flight system, sympathetic system, is organized into ganglia or a bunch of nerves together.
Uh-huh.
But the local anesthetic I inject only acts for about 8 hours. So the question has been raised by lay people as well as physicians alike, why would something like that have a prolonged effect?
Yeah, because theoretically it should only last 8 hours.
Right, which is a question. So interestingly enough, today my other paper came out, and I'll tell you about it in a second. But in order to understand what PTSD is, in order to understand how it works, you need to understand PTSD is or it's not. So for one, I think PTSD is a terrible term. It should be changed to PTSI, post-traumatic stress injury, because there is a biologic change in the brain. People have PTSD, and that's been demonstrated in a number of scans. A buddy of mine, Frank Ogberg, which is a very high-power psychiatrist, has been trying to change the name PTSD to PTSI. So what happens during trauma is, and it's been shown now, I'll give you some of the evidence that's been shown, when somebody is traumatized severely, something called NGF, or a specific type of substance, comes out in the brain in humans and in rats, and it makes sympathetic nerves or fight and flight nerves grow extra long. That's been shown.
Interesting.
And when that happens, they produce norepinephrine or adrenaline. So it turns out people with PTSD have more adrenaline in their brains and around their brain and nervous system. And as long as that persists, people have PTSD symptoms. So it turns out when you put a local anesthetic onto the ganglia in the neck, those extra nerve fibers die off. It's called pruning. And then norepinephrine goes back to normal state. That's the mechanism. My first publication about that came out in 2009. The one that just came out actually today, I think it also changes the DNA structure of the nerves.
Wow, that's interesting. Hey, Dr. Lipov, I need to take a quick break, so let me do that and we'll be right back. If you're a veteran interested in a new game plan, 7-Eleven may have what you're looking for. We're talking franchising, owning your own store. 7-Eleven's franchise program puts your military experience to work in a structured environment that's all about success. And special military incentives and financing make ownership easier. So think about it. Franchising with the convenience leader. It's a smart game plan for vets and a win for 7-Eleven. Check out the details at veteranonthemove.com/711. All right, we're back with Eugene Lipov talking about the stellate ganglion block. Now, Doctor, you were talking about, right before the break, there's actual evidence that people that have been exposed to trauma and severe stress, their nerves actually grow in the result or the combined effect of having excess adrenaline in their brain, and how the ganglion block is working for that. So finish that thought up for us, and then let's get to the practical use of it and how we can get some more information on this.
Sure. So the cool part about modern age, we can actually see PTSD using scans like functional MRI and PET scans. And then, so if you think of PTSD as a real phenomenon, it's much easier to A, look for real biological treatment, and B, believe that people actually have that. So I'm a very strong proponent that you need to think of it as biological phenomena. Clinical use of it, I think we've changed a number of people's lives as well as the family structures. You can look up, I'll give the website in a second, but what I love to see is how the veterans improve and the wives, a lot of times the female, and the children, the response to the fathers are unbelievable to see. Every time I see it, it actually chokes me up, and we've seen a lot of it. So I have a non-for-profit. It's called Global Post-Traumatic Stress Injury Foundation. You could look up my website it has most of kind of lay stuff, and some of the publication is healinghero.org. So singular, so healinghero.org. If you want to look up and see what we do, we would love to have people support our cause. We've had a few fundraisers, and as fast as we get the money and we use it on the veterans, we fly people back from multiple states, and then it makes a big difference. We do want to fly in their spouses a lot of times, just significant others. If people have air miles they can donate to this cause, we would love that as well.
That's great. Dr. Lipov, you're obviously a renowned anesthesiologist and a doctor, and you're doing some great things. But you're also a bit of an entrepreneur, I understand, correct?
Yeah, I mean that's a term that's been thrown around. Yes, so I do like to develop things. So I have one of my favorite project, hasn't gone very far yet, is my son and I wrote a book series for children when he was 4. And I'm still working on that. I do have a patent on the medication we're using, so we're trying to get that in line as well. Absolutely.
Yeah, and what you're trying to do with this treatment for PTSD is very similar, if not exactly, what an entrepreneurial pursuit entails, and that's you've got a great idea. You pretty much know it works, but in your case, you've got to deal with a lot of regulation, and I'm sure the FDA and who knows what else is involved in trying to get this pushed through. Right,
but I do have a definitely very specific plan how to make it available for everybody who needs it in the very near future. So that in that sense, I have a very clear plan for that, and I think we're getting very close, because I think this will become a standard of care in many places. And the thing I would like to make sure is that people who administer this will be best trained. And this is where I can really shine.
Yeah. And so you've got a clear plan. It's working great. But I'm sure you've run into some resistance. I mean, you said in the very beginning, after the first time you attempted it, somebody wrote a paper about you don't really know why it's working, so you shouldn't be doing it.
Yeah, we've had a lot of resistance because a lot of it has been from medical community because it's so weird. The other part is a number of people told me you're just not that smart. The medication it's been used for the last century, and who are you to figure out something like that? Well, my answer was, you didn't, I did, so that's how it is.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in entrepreneurship, we come across ideas all the time where one particular type of industry is using a product or some type of device, and somebody from a completely different industry discovers that, says, we could use that in what we do. And they pull it out of one industry and drop it into another. And at first, there's always resistance and question and everything like that. So it's just interesting to hear, really what you probably view it as more of a medical process and a medical type of struggle, but it's really an entrepreneurial struggle. I mean, you've developed this idea, you've discovered some information, you've even got some facts and some history on successful use of it going way back, but yet it hasn't been used yet commonly here in the U.S. So, and I again, this is just me talking, but I would imagine there's probably a lot of people that may resist you because they might be a little irritated that they didn't think of it first.
Yeah, and the other part is think about this is I call myself the Model T when everybody else is horse and buggy. This is extremely disruptive to the current cost structure and everything else. If you think about it, $9 billion a year is being spent on the drug by the VA, and psychotherapy is another story altogether. And this is markedly, the efficacy is 3 times, 4 times higher, and it's much cheaper.
And I had a question about efficacy. Did you say that if you get to a 30% efficacy rate, which is basically a healing or a rate of fixing somebody is a layman's terms,
right.
If you get to 30%, that's like the gold standard, which means like if you can fix people 30% of the time, is that what you meant?
No. What I'm saying is gold standard therapy by the VA currently is pharmaceutical and psychological therapy. Overall success rate for that is 30 to 40%. That's why we have such a huge PTSD problem.
Okay.
Success of Stellate is 70s or maybe 90%, depending who does it and how it's done.
Okay. Yeah, I wonder, do they figure in anytime we start talking about drugs and medications at the VA and veterans, just again, I just know it from a veteran point of view. I don't know it from a medical standpoint, but there's just a lot of failure, and I think there's a lot of contribution to the suicide rate and all sorts of other things because of that. So
that's exactly right.
Yeah.
Exactly right. Yep. You're right.
Yeah. Well, so your website is Global Post-Traumatic Stress Injury Foundation. Is that your website all spelled out, or we can go to healinghero.org?
Just go to healinghero.org. It's easier to remember and just go straight there.
Okay. All right, Dr. Lipov, fascinating information, and stay in touch with us and let us know how you're progressing on getting this procedure to become more commonplace for healing veterans with PTSD and everybody else with PTSD.
I'll keep you in the loop. Thank you so much.
All right, doctor, we're out. Thank you. Have you joined the Veteran on the Move Facebook group? I personally invite every guest that I have on the podcast to join the group. So the Veteran on the Move Facebook group is a great way to connect with previous podcast guests. Our Facebook group will keep you in touch with other veterans that are transitioning to entrepreneurship, and you will also get great updates and free guides on the people, programs, and resources that will help you in your transition to entrepreneurship. Thank you for listening to Veteran on the Move, your pathfinder to freedom. If you like the show, leave us a review on iTunes. Reviews are always greatly appreciated. So until next time, this veteran is Oscar Mike.